Greetings, fellow truckers and truckers. Well, look at Star Trek Deep Space Nine Season 6 continues on with You Are Cordially Invited. Captain Sisko looks out on the second level of the promenade with satisfaction as the flags of the Federation, the Klingon Empire, and Bajor are unfurled side by side from a rail, and the commerce of the promenade resumes heartily, populated by the state's civilian population, and a mix of officers from Starfleet, the Bajor militia, and the Klingon Defense Force. Even though the Federation is still at war with the Dominion, the celebrations over Starfleet's return to the station are continuing, and the atmosphere on the station is that of a happy one. In Ops, Sisko arrives to work, and he and Major Kira warmly wish each other a good morning, pretending how happy they are to be working together again. However, the captain has a lot of work in front of him, beginning with General Martog waiting in his office. Martog, who has just been appointed Supreme Commander of the Ninth Fleet, is more angry than honored, ranting about the amount of paperwork that comes with the position. Sisko, who recommended him for the position, smiles and offers his congratulations and offers to arrange quarters for the general aboard his new headquarters. Martok declines, preferring to keep his crown berth aboard the retirement, so at least feel like he's still in the war. He requests Sisko's permission to have Worf continue serving as his principal intelligence officer, and Sisko agrees, knowing that Worf seems to be the only officer he's met who can never have enough work. The conversation then drifts to Worf's son Alexander, whom Sisko hasn't met before. Martok, choosing his words carefully, calls Alexander a fine boy with the heart of his father, but in which he isn't much of a warrior. In Quirks, Alexander is sharing a drink of blood with his father and Jadzia Dax, sharing about one of his memorable screw-ups over the Rataran, flooding entire tank with separated hydraulic fluid. He says that, despite his clumsiness, he's been surprisingly popular among the Rataran's crew, who come to see him as a sort of good luck charm. He then surprised his father by mentioning that he's received new orders to transfer the cruiser IKS Yavang at the end of the week, says they took heavy casualties in engagement and most of the Rataran's crew will be transferring. Alexander leaves to get more blood wine. Quark approaches the two and asks if they have reconsidered having their wedding in Quarks. Worf tells Quark firmly that the wedding will be held in Kronos after the war is over. However, Dax, after looking thoughtful during the conversation, jumps in and agrees to Quark's request. Worf is surprised, but Dax explains that this way Alexander can attend the wedding before he leaves. When Alexander returns, Worf informs of their change of plans, and Alexander asks Alexander to be his Tawiyan sword-bearer, the Klingon equivalent of a best man. Alexander's so happy about this that he accidentally knocks over a tray of drinks. In a turbo lift, Dax and Kira are discussing the wedding, with Dax mentioning Worf has been planning everything for 3 months. Kira comes to the wedding seems to be dominated by what Worf wants, but Dax is right with that, knowing that it's what Worf has wanted since he was a boy, and she's already had several weddings. As they talk, they almost run into Odo in a corridor, but then he sees him and abruptly changes direction to avoid meeting them. Kira tells her it's because of what happened during the occupation of the station, of which Dax has no idea, but just felt like getting into it at the moment. Later, Worf meets with Sisko, Martok, Miles O'Brien, and Julian Bashir. He then asks them to join Martok and himself in Kalhya, a mental and spiritual journey that lasts for 4 nights before a Klingon wedding. Martok advises the four to get a good night's sleep before entering. 4 nights at a Klingon bachelor party. Just think of the possibilities. Bashir tells O'Brien as they leave. O'Brien tells the doctor that he's glad his wife Keiko isn't currently at the station. Later, Sisko and Martok go to one of the upper pylons to meet Martok's wife, Sorella, who has arrived on a Vorcha-class ship. By marrying Worf, Jadzia will become a member of the House of Martok. As the mistress of a great house, Sorella approves all the weddings conducted by its members. Sorella greets Martok by telling him he has put on weight and his hair is going gray. After Sorella tells him she expected to be in his grave, he tells her he will attempt to die soon, before the year is out if possible. After bringing her to Sisko, she has her taxes and goes alone. Martok is in awe of her, though Sisko a tad confused. Worf is with Dax as she prepares to meet Sorella. He is a bit concerned about the Varhamuk candles being replicated, but Dax is supposed to surprise he's just criticizing that the meeting will go fine. Then Sorella enters. Dax gives a Klingon greeting, but she responds immediately asking Worf to leave. Then she continues to be hostile. Sorella tells her that it will be difficult for a Klingon female to impress her, and that for an alien it would almost be impossible. Dax says she enjoys the challenge. Sorrel demands she prepare the appropriate meal for the following day, and finally, comes to accounts being faked before abruptly leaving. Aboard the return, Worf goes to Martok about why he never told him Sorrel was opposed to his marriage to Jadzia. Martok tells him Sorrel believes that by allowing aliens to the House of Martok, they risk losing their Klingon identity. Martok does not interfere in Sorrel's affairs, however, or Sorrel's affairs either. Worf wants to talk to her, but Martok reveals that Sorrel does not like Worf either. Martok mentions that it was his decision to allow Worf into the House of Martok, and he had every right to do so, and Sorrel accepted there is nothing she can do about it. Worf sarcastically tells Martok that he finds it comforting, and they said that you have no sense of humor. Martok laughs while Worf scowls at him. Meanwhile, Sisko, O'Brien, Bashir, and Alexander begin the Kahya in one of Quark's holosuites, only given what they assume will be further to Klingon debauchery. Worf shows them the Mastakas that are to be used at the conclusion of the wedding and ceremonial attack on Worf and Dax. The tradition stems from Kalos and Lucaris' wedding, where they were nearly killed by Muller's troops. Worf also mentions that the food sitting nearby is not to be eaten, as there to tempt them to break their fast. This is the first trial on the path to Kalhaya, deprivation, with the trials being blood, pain, sacrifice, anguish, and death. Everyone realizes that they were in for 4 days of hell. At the same time, Dax is undergoing a trial of her own. She's holding 2 bruisers and lifts them onto a column, conducting a recitation. Sorrel's unimpressed and orders her to do it again. Dax is frustrated, says it has been the 3rd time. Sorrel then tells her to end her attempt if she believes the house will not tolerate her weakness and she'll always be considered an outsider, quickly expressing her opinion to her. Dax is angry to this and lifts the braziers again. Dax's next trial is to recite the history of all the women in Sorrel's family. Dax is recounting the end of the 2nd dynasty, but then tells her one of Sorrel's ancestors, who was apparently the daughter of the Klingon Emperor Raklaw, was in fact a concubine through a little-known fact. This surprised Sorrel, who Dax is continuing with the correct history. While this is happening, Kira congratulates Jake Sisko on having his stories of life under the Dominion occupation published by the Federation News Service. Odo approaches but once again avoids Kira, but then has Jake ignore it. Jake and Kira then see Sisko, Bashir, O'Brien, and Alexander enter the holosuites again on the second of the path to Kal Haya, appearing quite serious. This trial is shedding of blood. Sisko, O'Brien, and Alexander quietly take a step back before Worf and Martok turn around. Though Worf is surprised to see that Bashir has volunteered to go first, Bashir is even more surprised. Worf tells the doctor not to worry, as the pain only lasts a few seconds, and approaches him with a knife. Meanwhile, Dax is hosting a raucous party in her quarters with the main people including Kira, Nog, Quark, Rom, Lita, Morn, and Jake. She's invited Lieutenant Manuel Atoa from the U.S. Southern to perform a fire dance. It's a big hit with everyone. Meanwhile, Bashir and O'Brien are chained to the ceiling above the floor covered with hot coals. Bashir tells O'Brien he's having a vision. He's going to kill Worf. O'Brien agrees with him. Odo arrives at the party with 2 Bajoran deputies after receiving complaints about the noise that he also heard there was a fight. Kira's first at the door, and now he's forced to talk to her. Kira tells Odo the fight was between Morn and Abolian, but the two are getting along fine now that she is authorizing the party to continue on her authority as first officer of the station. Odo turns to leave, but he and Kira finally realize they have to talk about what happened during their occupation. Although his deputies with the rest of the night off, allowing his deputies rest enough to enjoy the party, Odo and Kira have a private talk. Odo and Kira leave to talk in private as Dax begins to flirt with Atoa following his act. Soon Sorrel arrives, ignoring everyone there, and tells Dax it's time for the Brenan ritual. Fed up with her, Dax tells her she is busy. Sorrel insults her, calling her a Rizian slut. Sorrel orders her to come with her, or she will cancel the wedding. After Dax refuses, Sorrel pulls a tic-tac. Dax disarms her and punches her in the face. Sorrel leaves and Dax forces the party to resume. The next morning, Dax is over the monumental hangover, and after kicking out the partygoers, Morn and Atoa, went up crouching for the night, Slingshooter's Arctogeno from the replicator. Worf arrives and tells Dax they have to talk. Sorrel has canceled the wedding. Dax tries to sleep instead, but is prodded. She begins to explain what happened when when the two hear voices coming from the adjoining room. Opening the door, they find Odo and Kira, who are still talking. Dax tells the two that it's 10:30 and should quickly leave as they're both meant to be on duty. Worf tells Dax to go to Sorrel and beg for forgiveness, to which she reacts angrily and tells Worf that all he should do is go to Captain Sisko and he can marry them instead. Worf's upset that Dax has so little regard for his traditions and feelings and sadly leaves, telling her that Sorrel was right. There should be no wedding. O'Brien and Bashir enter Quark's bar where they see the Klingon bangers being removed. Quark tells them the wedding has been cancelled. The two are sorry for Worf and Dax for a couple of seconds, and immediately order dinner. Martok goes to speak with Worf, who's brooding his quarters aboard the USS Defiant, and tells his friend he has made a mistake. Worf can't help but feel that Martok is right. Recent events have made it clear just how different he and Dax are. He is serious while she is fun. She has many marriages behind her while he is preparing for his first. He can't stand Quark while she plays Tonga with him, among many other things. As a result, Worf feels that love might not be enough in this case. Martok admits that Sorrel is nothing like the woman he imagined he would marry. She has too much pride and vanity for his tastes, and yet he loves her with all his heart. Martok reminds Worf that honor and glory, things that Klingon prize above everything else, are worth nothing more without someone to share it with. O'Brien and Bashir just about to eat a huge meal when Sisko, Martok, and Alexander enter, telling them the wedding is back on as Worf is apologizing to Dax. Sisko tells Quark to remove the food, that there should be no more food for those on the path to Kal-Hia. Quark then tells them there are no refunds for those on the path to Kial either, much to O'Brien and Bashir's dismay. However, Worf tells them that Dax has refused to be married, so the wedding is still off. Sisko decides to go and talk to his friend, telling the others to make sure Bashir and O'Brien don't eat anything. Sisko goes to Dax's quarters, where she is arranging her items angrily. Dax finds a note apologizing to Sorrel insulting, as she was once the Federation ambassador to the Klingon Empire, and that she negotiated the Khitomer Accords before Worf was born. Sisko, determined to snap Dax out of her stubbornness, reminds his friend that it was Curzon who negotiated the Accords, not her, and that she should go to Sorrel and do whatever it takes to be forgiven, even if it involves groveling. Sisko also tells Dax that if she cares so little for Klingon traditions, she should never fall in love with Worf in the first place. Jadzia tells Sisko that her life was completely mapped out. Friends, a career, but then one day a certain Klingon came aboard the station, and all of a sudden, she found herself falling in love with him. Dax realizes she has to apologize to Sorella, and thanks her old friend for asking him what happened to the ensign she used to know. Sisko simply tells her he grew up. Dax responds by saying that she must as well. In Quarks, several Klingons begin to be Klingon drums. The marriage service is almost operatic. It relates the creation of the Klingons by the gods, who really are killed by their own creators. After Worf and Dax recite their vows, starting to join with each other against all that oppose them, Sorrel pronounces them married, and they kiss. Dax makes a gesture of respect to Sorrel. Sorrel then embraces Dax, welcoming her to the mouth of Martok and calling her my daughter. Bashir and O'Brien, still surviving after the grilling match at the path to Kal-Hia, have been hovering anxiously with their mastakas. Martok gives the word as soon as Sorrel hugs Dax, and they build hearty war cries and charge the altar with their mastakas held high. Wow. So let's take a look at some production notes from this episode. To ensure the right level of energy for the party scenes, director David Livingston staged an actual party, including live music. He did this because many of the actors had to shout on set to be heard, which had an air of realism to the scene. As he explains, quote, with that drumming in the background, they had to be more active. They had to deal with it. If I'd have them stop playing, the people would have toned down their performances, end quote. Of the party scene in general, David Livingston comments, quote, the party scene I think everybody was afraid of because it was so daunting, and wanted to saying, this is a great challenge. Traditionally, party scenes on Star Trek end up not being very interesting. It's just people ending up standing around talking. But the writers infused it in the writing with a certain amount of energy by having a fire dancer. And I just said to myself, I have to bring that same kind of visual energy and excitement that they put on the page. Otherwise, it's not. Otherwise, it could be a lot like the other Star Trek parties that are compelling and don't have any energy to them. My template was the party starring Peter Sellers, filmed in the '60s, which just had this frantic kind of energy, with people moving around all the time and having somebody that walks bring you to another scene that takes place there. So it's all continuous. You're not just cutting from one part of the room to another, something that brings you to the other scene that's occurring. End quote. The dance performed by Aaron Eisenberg, aka Nog, was completely improvised on set. David Livingston simply told Eisenberg to dance as goofy as you want. Tara joining in was also completely improvised. Eisenberg had claimed that in his 7 years on the show, it was the only time for him that a piece of improvisation made into the final episode. Director David Livingston had originally intended that the scene where Bajor and O'Brien discussed killing Worf was to be shot entirely in one long take that would start on their feet and tilt upwards before finally moving in for a two-shot. I decided against it because it meant that the actors would generally have to hang from the rail for the duration of the take. Gigi Hertzler, who played Martok, and Shannon Cochran, who played Sorella, based their performances and their scene together on Benedict and Beatrice in Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. During the second take of the scene where Dax punches Sorella, Tara accidentally punched Shannon Cochran for real. I filmed the Cal Half scenes. J.T. Hertzler commented, quote, "That was another hoot. There was like a 5,000-degree fire going on. It was a hot day outside. We were standing next to this fire pretending not to peel because we're Klingons. Those other guys complained, those wimps, Colm and Sid, hanging from their little fingers over the fire. Wimpy boys," end quote. J.G. Hertzler considers the scene where he considers Pegum Sisko's baseball one of his favorite moments while working on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Hertzler commented, quote, "That little moment was one of my favorites on the show. It was really about two actors playing with each other as little, if anything, to do with the show. Technically, it could be called secondary action in terms of the method, but in this case, it was really Avery and I having some fun with the world around us. Surely, Martok had never seen a baseball before and may have correctly identified the covering of the ball as the height of some kind of animal. For all he knew, it could be Targ. But Martok was very curious about the markings on the ball and the way it was made. Meanwhile, they were discussing an attack on Cardassia or some such monumental topic, and distracted by a baseball. Sisko may have been afraid Martok might have thought it to be food and taken a bite out of it, or some such action. So we told each other a bit, and that's what we ended up with. Next notice the play-by-play, that's the story," end quote. Neither Nana Visitor nor Rene Auberjonois was happy with how the resolution between Kira and Odo was presented, i.e. off-screen. Ira Stephen Bear was also unhappy with it, and he has admitted, quote, "That was a bad mistake," end quote. The reason the scene was written that way was because of last-minute rewrite and no time to come up with anything else. As Ronald D. Moore explains, quote, "We had originally planned that in this episode we were going to start having Odo lock himself away, refusing to mingle with anyone else on the station. The events behind the lines in favor of the bold had really shaken and made him wonder, what am I doing? Where do I belong? Look at what I almost did." She was going to show up at the wedding and made an unexpected announcement. He would say, "I decided I can't be friends with any of you anymore, because clearly you can't trust me, so I need to go my own way. I'll do my job, but that's it, and that's all it's ever going to be." And then he would walk out again. And the people there were just going to go, "Whoa, what is that? Whoa, what does this mean?" Then we're going to play Odo completely different for the rest of the season, end quote. At the last minute, however, Bear, Hans Belmar, and Auberjonois came to Moore to inquire where the character was ultimately going to end up. Auberjonois in particular felt strongly about this new development, feeling that Odo was being alienated, and they wondered what Moore's ultimate plan was, how he was going to get Odo back into the fold. Unfortunately, he didn't have one. He hadn't thought that far ahead, so the plan was dropped at the last minute. As Moore says, quote, "It felt wrong to take him out of the mix and alienate him from everybody without a clear idea in our heads about why we were doing it," end quote. This change of plans, however, left no time for Moore to write a deep scene of resolution between Odo and Kira. He does acknowledge, however, that his off-screen solution wasn't entirely successful. Quote, "I know Nana and Renee don't like it, and some of the fans don't like it, and I don't like it. It's just one of those things that we had to do because we were out of time, and I felt I had to do something so it didn't seem as if we hadn't even touched on it, end quote. And now finally let's take a look at some trivia. Paramount's promotion of this episode included an invitation which noted, quote, Paramount cordially invites you to bear witness to the exchange of nuptials between two Star Trek series regulars for the first time in Star Trek history, end quote. This episode marks the final appearance of Alexander Rosenko on Star Trek. Aww. In this episode, it's revealed that Jadzia's father's name is Kela, and that the Dax symbiote is 356 years old. It's also revealed that Curzon Dax negotiated the Khitomer Accords. O'Brien wonders why Worf and Dax's wedding is abruptly cancelled when Quark tells him. His win to Keiko was also briefly called off at the beginning of Data's Day in The Next Generation. This episode marks the first and only appearance of the modified TNG dress uniform before the adoption of the dress rights introduced in Star Trek Insurrection. In the party scene, Kira can be seen wearing the bracelet given to her to Kenny Gamore. The chime in Worf's room is the same chime as Picard's chime to his radio room in TNG. Oh, interesting. So overall, I think this is a pretty fun episode, and hey, we get to see Worf and Dax get married, so yeah, it's gonna be a unit that's gonna last a long time. Maybe towards the end of, maybe for the rest of the series, or maybe for the rest of the season. So, yeah. Anyway, so overall I give You Are Cordially Invited 5 warp cores out of 5. Let me tune in as we till next episode, Resurrection. So, until then, live long and prosper, everybody.